Look who showed up, the lone operator, the one who walks without permission, the soul who stopped asking for backup, stopped begging for company, stopped pretending they needed a tribe to survive. Welcome back, you beautiful isolated apex. Predator, you magnificent solo mission. You untamed frequency operating on a wavelength they can't even detect, let alone understand. And oh, they're losing their minds over it, aren't they? You see, they've been watching you move through this world alone. No crew, no clique, no safety net, no emotional support group, and it's driving them absolutely insane. Because in their world, in their limited programming, you're not supposed to function like this. You're supposed to need them, need validation, need witnesses, need cheerleaders, need someone to hold your hand through every decision. But you just keep moving, building, executing, thriving, and you're doing it completely solo. And that breaks every rule in their book. They thought isolation would weaken you. They thought loneliness would crack you. They thought operating without backup would expose your vulnerabilities. But instead you became more focused, more dangerous, more unstoppable than ever. Before. And now they're sitting in their little groups, their comfortable tribes, their safety circles, whispering the same question over and over. How the hell are they doing this alone? How are they not falling apart? How are they getting stronger without us? Here's what they'll never admit. Your solo operation terrifies them because it reveals the truth. Most people don't operate in groups because they're strong. They operate in groups because they're weak. They need constant validation. They need mirrors. They need echoes. They need people around them to convince them they're making the right choices. But you stopped needing that confirmation years ago. You learned to trust your own instincts, to make decisions in silence, to execute without applause, to validate yourself from within, and that is what makes you dangerous. They watch you make moves without consulting anyone. They watch you cut ties without explanation. They watch you build empires in silence, while they're still having committee meetings about what color to paint the walls. You don't ask permission. You don't seek approval. You don't wait for consensus. You just move, and every time you do it, sends a shockwave through their system, because you're living proof that their entire social structure is optional. When you started operating solo, they thought you were lost. They thought you were lonely. They thought you were going through a phase. They waited for you to come crawling back, needing friendship, needing connection, needing their acceptance. But you never did. You just kept rising, kept building, kept evolving. And now they realize it wasn't a phase. It was an awakening. Let me tell you what's really happening behind their eyes. When they see you operating alone, they see freedom. They see someone who doesn't need their approval, doesn't fear their rejection, doesn't require their presence. And that absolutely terrifies them. Because if you can thrive without them, then what's their value? What's their leverage? What's their power over you? Nothing. And people who build their entire identity around being needed, they can't handle someone who doesn't need them. You became the nightmare scenario for every manipulator, every controller, every person who uses social pressure as a weapon, because you removed yourself from their battlefield. You stopped playing the game where they make the rules. You created your own game, your own rules, your own victory conditions, and you're winning spectacularly without them. They tried isolation as punishment. They ghosted you, excluded you, left you out, hoping you'd break, hoping you'd beg, hoping you'd compromise yourself just to get back in the circle. But you took that isolation and weaponized it. You turned loneliness into focus. You turned silence into strategy. You turned abandonment into liberation. And now you're so far ahead they can't even see your shadow anymore. And here's the part that really kills them. You're not bitter about it. You're not angry. You're not seeking revenge. You're just thriving, existing, glowing in your solo lane. And your peace, your genuine don't need. Anybody peace is more offensive to them than any insult you could throw. because it proves they were never necessary. You don't miss them, you don't think about them, you don't talk about them, you just build. And every brick you lay without their help is another nail in the coffin of their ego. They thought your strength came from connection, but your strength came from disconnection. They thought your power needed witnesses, but your power needed privacy. They thought your growth required community, but your growth required solitude. You figured out what most people never learn, that sometimes you have to walk alone, not because nobody wants to walk with you, but because the path you're on requires a frequency most people can't match. You're not antisocial. You're selectively social. You're not lonely. You're intentionally alone. There's a massive difference between isolation forced upon you and solitude chosen by you. One is punishment. The other is power. And you chose power. They watch you operate, and they can't figure out your support system. They can't identify your advisors. They can't trace your network, because there isn't one. There's just you, your instincts, your vision, your execution. And that terrifies them, because they've been taught that success requires teams, requires mentors, requires connections, requires playing politics. But you're shattering that illusion with every solo victory. When you win alone, it's louder than when they win in groups. When you build alone, it's more impressive than when they build with armies. When you survive alone, it proves you're made of something they'll never understand. And they hate that. They hate that you don't need their validation. They hate that you don't fear their abandonment. They hate that you turned their weapon isolation into your greatest strength. Let me tell you what goes through their minds. When they see you thriving solo, they think, what's wrong with them? Why don't they need people? Are they broken? Are they cold? Are they heartless? And the answer is no, you're not broken. You're just built different. You're not cold. You're just clear. You're not heartless. You just learned to guard your energy like the precious resource it is. You stopped explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand. You stopped defending your choices to people who were always going to judge you. Stop trying to make people comfortable with your independence because you realized their comfort is not your responsibility. Their understanding is not your job. Their acceptance is not your goal. You have a mission, and that mission doesn't require their permission. They wanted you to be weak, wanted you to be dependent, wanted you to be controllable. But you became the opposite. You became self-sufficient, self-reliant, self-validated, and now they're stuck watching someone they thought they could manipulate, become someone they can't even reach. Your solo operation isn't loneliness. It's strategic isolation. It's not antisocial. It's anti-distraction. It's not fear of people. It's protection of peace. You're not running from connection. You're running toward purpose. And purpose doesn't always come with a crowd. Sometimes it comes in silence. Sometimes it comes alone. Sometimes it comes when you finally stop waiting for someone else to believe in you and start believing in yourself with such intensity that their doubt becomes irrelevant. They paranoid. Now really paranoid because they can't predict. You can't control. You can't manipulate someone they can't reach. And you're unreachable. You're not ignoring their calls. You just don't hear them anymore. You're on a different frequency, operating in a different dimension, playing a different game, and they're still stuck on level 1, wondering why their old tactics don't work on you anymore. Here's what they don't tell you about operating solo. It makes you sharper. When you have no one to consult, you learn to trust your gut. When you have no one to blame, you take full responsibility. When you have no one to celebrate with, you learn to validate yourself. And those 3 skills, instinct, responsibility, self-validation, those are the holy trinity of power. That's what makes you unstoppable. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes them paranoid as hell. You're not lonely. You're liberated. You're not isolated. You're elevated. You're not alone. You're in your own lane. And that lane is a highway to places they'll never reach because they're too busy, looking for passengers while you're too busy driving. When they see you operate solo and succeed solo and thrive solo, it breaks their brain because they've been programmed to believe humans need humans to survive. And yes, humans need humans, but you need the right humans or no humans at all. And you chose no humans over wrong humans. And that choice is what separated you from the herd. Let's go deeper into their paranoia, because this is where it gets really good. They're not just confused, they're obsessed. They refresh your page, they check your status, they ask mutual friends about you. They want to know how you're doing it, who you're talking to, what your secret is. And the secret is, there is no secret. You just stopped giving your energy to people who didn't deserve it. You stopped waiting for permission from people who had no authority. You stopped seeking validation from people who didn't value you. And when you did that, when you reclaimed all that wasted energy, you became unstoppable. They're paranoid because they know they lost access. They know they lost leverage. They know they lost control. And people who are used to controlling you, losing that control, feels like the world is ending for them. They thought they could puppet you with guilt, with shame, with fear of loneliness. But you cut every string. You walked away from the puppet show, and now you're writing your own script, directing your own movie, starring in your own life. And they're just extras in the background, wondering how you got the leading role. Your solo operation is a statement. It says, I don't need your approval to exist. I don't need your presence to thrive. I don't need your validation to know my worth. And that statement, that's a declaration of war on their ego. Their entire identity is built on being needed, being included, being part of something. And you proved that you don't need to be part of anything except yourself. They thought loneliness would humble you, but it empowered you. They thought isolation would break you, but it built you. They thought operating solo would expose your weakness, but it revealed your strength. And now they're stuck in their groups, their tribes, their circles, talking about you, wondering about you, obsessing about you, while you're not thinking about them at all. That's the real power, isn't it? Not needing them, not thinking about them, not being affected by their opinion. You're in your own world, building your own empire, and they're just spectators, watching from the outside, pressing their faces against the glass, trying to figure out how you did it. Here's what they'll never understand. You didn't become strong by surrounding yourself with people. You became strong by removing everyone who made you weak. You didn't find yourself in a crowd, you found yourself in solitude. You didn't discover your power through connection. You discovered it through disconnection. And now that you know who you are without them, you'll never need them again. Your solo status isn't a phase, it's a lifestyle. It's not temporary, it's permanent. It's not weakness, it's warfare. You're not hiding, you're hunting. And what are you hunting? Purpose, clarity, peace, power. And none of those things require a crowd. They're paranoid because they see you winning without their help. They see you happy without their presence. They see you growing without their input. And it makes them question everything. Makes them question their own friendships, their own connections, their own need for constant company. Because if you can do it alone, why can't they? And the answer is they can't. They don't have what you have. They don't have the strength, the clarity, the self-sufficiency. They're dependent on external validation, and you generate your own. Let me tell you what happens when you operate solo for long enough. You become addicted to the peace. You become addicted to the freedom. You become addicted to the clarity. And once you taste that, once you experience life without unnecessary voices, without unsolicited opinions, without energy, vampires disguised as friends, you can never go back. You'll never tolerate surface-level connections again. You'll never settle for mediocre company again. You'll never compromise your peace for someone's presence again. They wanted you to be lonely, but you became selective. They wanted you to be desperate, but you became disciplined. They wanted you to be weak, but you became a weapon. And now they're paranoid because they realize they created their own nightmare. They pushed you into isolation, hoping it would destroy you, and instead, it forged you. Your lone wolf energy has them shook, because lone wolves don't follow the pack rules. Lone wolves don't wait for permission. Lone wolves don't seek approval. They hunt alone, they move alone, they survive alone, and they thrive alone. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're not waiting for a tribe. You're not searching for your people. You're not trying to fit in because you finally realized you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand out. They're watching you now, really watching you, not with admiration, with fear, because fear is what people feel when they realize they can't control you, can't predict you, can't manipulate you. You're off the grid, off the radar, off their map. And that makes you dangerous, makes you unpredictable, makes you free. When you operate solo, you answer to no one, you compromise with no one, you wait for no one. You're your own boss, your own team, your own army. And that level of independence, that level of self-sufficiency, that level of I don't need anybody energy is what's making them lose sleep at night. They thought you needed them for support, for guidance, for validation, for connection. But you needed none of it. You needed space, you needed silence, you needed solitude. And in that solitude, you found something they'll never find: yourself. Let's talk about what really happens in their group chats, in their private conversations, in their whispered discussions about you. They say things like they've changed, they're different now, they're too independent, they're cold, they act like they don't need anyone. And what they're really saying is they're not controllable anymore, they're not manipulatable anymore, they're not one of us anymore, and they're right. You're not one of them anymore because you evolved beyond their frequency, you outgrew their circle, you transcended their level, and now you're operating in a dimension they don't have access to. Your solo operation is your superpower. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. It's not weakness, it's strength. It's not loneliness, it's liberation. You're not isolated, you're insulated from their drama, from their negativity, from their manipulation, from their control. And that insulation is what's allowing you to build, to grow, to thrive without interference. They're paranoid because they can't figure out your next move. They can't predict your decisions. They can't influence your choices because you stopped broadcasting, you stopped explaining, you stopped sharing your plans. And now you just execute. And every time you execute successfully, without their input, without their advice, without their blessing, it proves you never needed them in the first place. Here's the truth. They don't want you to know. Most people who operate in groups aren't strong. They're scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of making decisions. Scared of being responsible. Scared of being judged. And they use the group as a shield, as an excuse, as a safety net. But you don't need a safety net because you're not afraid of falling. And even if you fall, you know you'll get back up alone just like you've done 1,000 times before. Your lone wolf energy is making them paranoid because it's exposing their weakness. They need constant reassurance, you don't. They need constant validation, you don't. They need constant company, you don't. And that difference, that gap between their dependence and your independence, is what's driving them crazy. When you walk alone, you walk faster. When you move alone, you move quieter. When you operate alone, you operate deadlier. And they feel it. They feel the shift in your energy. They feel the power in your silence. They feel the danger in your independence. And it scares them because they know they can't compete with someone who doesn't need the things they need. You're not playing their game anymore. You're not following their rules anymore. You're not seeking their approval anymore. You created your own game, your own rules, your own approval system, and you're winning by metrics. They don't even understand. They thought your solo operation was a cry for help, but it was a declaration of independence. They thought your silence was weakness, but it was strategy. They thought your isolation was loneliness, but it was preparation. And now that the preparation is complete, now that the silence has ended, now that the isolation has forged you into something unbreakable, they're terrified because they realize they're not dealing with the old you anymore. They're dealing with someone who doesn't need them, doesn't fear them, doesn't want them, and that's the most dangerous person in the world. Your lone wolf status isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. You're not broken for operating solo. You're built different. You're not weird for preferring solitude. You're wise. You're not cold for not needing people. You're clear. You know what drains you. You know what distracts you. You know what dilutes your power, and you removed it all. Every fake friend, every energy, vampire, every unnecessary voice. And what's left is pure, unfiltered, undiluted you. They're paranoid because paranoia is what happens when people realize they lost control over something they thought they owned. And they thought they owned you. They thought your need for acceptance, your fear of rejection, your desire for belonging gave them power over you. But you shattered that illusion. You proved you don't need to belong to anyone except yourself. You don't need to be accepted by anyone except yourself. You don't need validation from anyone except yourself, and that self-sufficiency, that's what's making them lose their minds. Let me tell you what your future looks like operating solo. You're going to build things they can't imagine. You're going to reach heights they can't comprehend. You're going to achieve victories they can't explain. Because while they're busy managing group dynamics, navigating politics, playing social games, you're going to be focused, executing, building, and that focus, that singular, laser-focused energy is going to take you places crowds can never go. Your lone wolf energy isn't making you weak. It's making you legendary. You're not the person who got left behind. You're the person who left first. You're not the one who couldn't find their tribe. You're the one who realized they didn't need one. You're not lonely, you're selective. And your selectiveness, your standards, your refusal to settle for mediocre company is what's going to separate you from everyone else. They're paranoid. Now let them be paranoid. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them watch. Because while they're busy being paranoid about you, you're busy being unstoppable. You're busy being focused. You're busy being free. And that freedom, that peace, that power, that's what they'll never have because they're too busy needing people. And you don't need anybody. You're the lone wolf, the solo operator, the one who walks without permission. And that's exactly what makes you dangerous. That's exactly what makes you powerful. That's exactly what makes you free. So keep walking alone, keep building alone, keep winning alone. Because your solo operation isn't a weakness, it's your greatest strength. And they're finally starting to realize it, and it's making them paranoid as hell. Oh, they thought you were done, didn't they? They really believed the story was over. The book was closed. The curtain had dropped on your little performance. They watched you stumble, watched you bleed, watched you crawl through the sharpest years of your existence, and somewhere in their twisted little minds, they wrote your obituary before you even stopped breathing. But here's the thing that's eating them alive right now, the thing that's keeping them awake at 3 a.m. scrolling through your life trying to decode what the hell just happened. You weren't even trying. You weren't flexing. You weren't proving anything to anyone. That was 0.1% of what lives inside you, and it shattered their entire reality like glass hitting concrete. Can you even imagine what happens when you stop playing small? When you stop dimming your light to make their insecurities comfortable? When you finally decide to show up at full capacity? Let's rewind for a second because they need to understand what they witnessed, what they're still trying to rationalize, what they're desperately trying to minimize in conversations with people who never even met you. For months, maybe years, you operated on reserve power, on fumes, on the absolute minimum energy required to keep your heart beating and your lungs moving. You were running on emergency mode, The kind of survival setting that kicks in when life has beaten you so badly that just getting out of bed feels like climbing Everest in your sleep. And during that time, during that chapter they thought was your final form, during that season they assumed was your peak and your valley all at once, you still managed to do something they couldn't comprehend. You still loved people who didn't deserve it. You still showed up to rooms that didn't celebrate you. You still created, still dreamed, still smiled through the kind of pain that would have hospitalized their spirit. That wasn't strength. That wasn't courage. That wasn't you trying. That was you existing on 0.1%. And it still outshined everything they were giving at 100%. Now, let's talk about the collapse, the implosion, the complete and total disintegration of their confidence that happened the moment you started healing. The second you began to remember who the hell you actually were before life taught you to shrink. They watched you stand up straighter, and it felt like an earthquake. They saw you speak with certainty, and it sounded like thunder. They noticed you stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped explaining your choices, stopped seeking permission to exist loudly, and suddenly their whole social hierarchy started cracking. Because here's what they never told you, what they'll never admit even under oath. What keeps them up at night, staring at ceilings they can't afford, because they spent their energy trying to dim your star instead of building their own. You were never the problem. You were the standard. You were the mirror they couldn't look into without seeing every compromise they made, every dream they abandoned, every excuse they worshipped, like it was strategy. Your 0.1% reminded them of the 100% they'll never touch, because they're too busy managing perceptions instead of building substance, too occupied with looking successful instead of becoming capable, too addicted to the comfort of mediocrity dressed in designer labels and borrowed confidence. The moment you stopped performing for their approval, stopped auditioning for roles in productions you never wanted to star in, stopped contorting yourself into shapes that fit their narrow definitions of acceptable, that's when their world started collapsing. Not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, like a building with a cracked foundation finally giving in to gravity. They tried to gaslight you into thinking you were changing in a bad way, that your boundaries were aggression, that your standards were arrogance, that your peace was privilege. They threw everything at you. Every manipulation tactic in the handbook, every guilt trip, every silent treatment, every indirect post meant to pull you back into the arena where they could manage you, control you, predict you. But you didn't bite, you didn't engage, you didn't even flinch. And that indifference, that refusal to dance to music you didn't choose, that's what truly broke them, because they realized they no longer had power over your emotions, your decisions, your narrative. And people who built their entire identity on controlling others absolutely cannot survive the moment their puppets cut the strings and walk away. Let's get specific about this 0.1% they witnessed, because they're still trying to convince themselves it was luck, timing, connections, anything except the truth that you are fundamentally operating on a different frequency than they'll ever access. That 0.1% looked like you finally saying no without a paragraph of justification. It looked like you choosing yourself without guilt. It looked like you walking away from tables where you were the topic but never the guest of honor. It looked like you building in silence while they celebrated in noise. It looked like you healing your trauma instead of recycling it into content for sympathy. It looked like you becoming so comfortable in your own skin that their opinions felt like distant weather in a country you'll never visit. And they watched all of this happen, watched you transform without their input, without their advice, without their validation, and it destroyed the illusion they'd built that you needed them, that you were lucky to be in their circle, that they were doing you a favor by keeping you around as the person they could feel superior to whenever their own lives felt empty. But here's where it gets beautiful, where the story takes a turn they never saw coming because they were too busy writing your ending to notice you were just beginning. That 0.1% was your warm-up, Your stretching before the race, your sound check before the concert, and they mistook it for your grand finale. They threw parties celebrating your departure, convinced themselves they won, told stories about how they always knew you weren't built for their level, how you couldn't handle the pressure, how you were all potential and no execution. They got comfortable in your absence, redistributed your energy among themselves like vultures picking at what they thought was a carcass, never realizing you weren't dead, you were metamorphosing. And butterflies don't announce their arrival. They just show up one day and make the whole garden look different. So, while they were busy toasting to your failure, you were busy becoming unforgettable, not through revenge, not through proving them wrong, but through the simple, devastating act of becoming so aligned with your truth that their version of you became fiction, became mythology, became a story they tell themselves to sleep better at night, knowing they had you and lost you forever. Imagine, just for a second, just for the sake of watching their faces drain of color, what happens when you stop operating on reserve power and actually plug into your full capacity? When you stop being polite with your presence and start being powerful with your purpose. That 0.1% built a life they envy while you were still healing. Now imagine 1%, imagine 10%, imagine 50%. Imagine the moment you decide that playing small was a courtesy you no longer owe to people who never appreciated your kindness as kindness but mistook it for weakness. Imagine them watching you move through the world with the kind of confidence that doesn't need validation, the kind of success that doesn't need announcement, the kind of peace that doesn't need defense. Imagine them realizing that every narrative they sold about you was just their fear of who you were becoming. Every lie they spread was just a prayer that you'd stay broken. Every smile they gave you was just a mask, hiding the terror that one day you'd remember your power and never look back. The collapse wasn't just their world, it was their identity, their hierarchy, their entire social structure that depended on you playing a role you outgrew the moment you realized. The script was written by people who never wanted you to have a speaking part, let alone the leading role in your own story. They needed you to be the supporting character, the one who makes them look good, the one who absorbs the pain so they can avoid their own, the one who stays stuck so they can feel like they're moving forward. But the moment you stepped into your 0.1%, the moment you stopped accepting crumbs and started baking your own bread, the moment you looked at their table and realized you'd rather eat alone than feast with people who starve your spirit, that's when everything they built on your submission, your silence, your sacrifice, came crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane they didn't see coming, because they were too busy admiring their own reflection to notice the storm gathering behind them. And now they're living in the aftermath of their own arrogance, watching you from a distance they can't close no matter how hard they try, because you're not the same person they knew. You're not even the same species anymore. You evolved past their frequency. You're operating on wavelengths they can't detect, can't disrupt, can't decode. They're sending indirect messages, hoping you'll respond. They're telling mutual friends they miss you, hoping it'll get back to you and soften your resolve. They're posting content clearly aimed at your attention, dropping your favorite songs, mentioning your old haunts, performing nostalgia like it's a magic spell that'll reverse time and bring you back to the version of you they could manage, control, predict. But you're not coming back, because you didn't leave them. You left who you had to become to tolerate them. And the person you are now wouldn't even recognize the person who accepted their treatment as normal, their disrespect as friendship, their manipulation as love. Let's talk about what happens next, about the future they're terrified of. The timeline where you're not holding back anymore, where that 0.1% becomes 1%, 10%, 100%, where you stop being the best kept secret and start being the loudest truth in every room you enter. They're scared because they know, even if they'll never admit it, that you were the most talented person in their circle and you were operating on fumes. They know you were the most intelligent person in their conversations and you were barely participating. They know you were the most capable person in their network and you weren't even trying. So what happens when you actually try? What happens when you stop dimming your light? What happens when you stop making yourself smaller to make them comfortable? What happens when you walk into your full power, your complete potential, your absolute truth? The answer is simple and devastating. They become irrelevant, not because you made them irrelevant, but because they made themselves irrelevant the moment they chose to tear down someone who could have built with them, the moment they chose competition over collaboration, the moment they chose ego over evolution. That 0.1% was your mercy, your grace period, your silent prayer that they'd wake up and realize what they had before it was too late. But they didn't wake up, they doubled down, they got louder, they got meaner, they got more desperate in their attempts to prove you were the problem, when really, you were the solution. They were too blind to recognize. And now that you're healing, now that you're growing, now that you're glowing, they're scrambling to rewrite history, trying to take credit for your transformation like they were the catalyst, when really they were just the obstacle, the weight you had to learn to lift, the lesson you had to learn. So you'd never accept that treatment again from anyone, ever, period, end of story. They want to be footnotes in your success story, but really they're just the rough draft you had to write before you learned your voice, the practice round before the real game, the tutorial level before you entered the actual arena where real players compete. Here's the thing about revealing 0.1% of your power and watching their whole world collapse. It teaches you something critical about energy, about presence, about the absolute truth that you don't need to announce your arrival. You just need to arrive. You don't need to prove you've changed. You just need to embody the change. You don't need to explain why you're different. You just need to be so different that explanation becomes irrelevant. They collapsed because they built their confidence on the belief that you'd always be below them, that you'd always need them, that you'd always come back, no matter how badly they treated you. And when that belief shattered, when that foundation cracked, when that narrative died, everything they constructed on top of it came tumbling down, not because you destroyed it, but because it was never real to begin with. It was just an illusion they maintained. As long as you participated in the delusion, as long as you played the role, as long as you accepted the script. But you stopped accepting, you stopped participating, you stopped playing, and suddenly the whole production shut down because you were the only one bringing real energy, real talent, real substance to a stage full of people playing dress-up with borrowed confidence and rented personalities. And now they're auditioning for new victims, new people to make feel small so they can feel big, new empaths to drain so they can feel full, new spirits to break so they can feel whole. But it won't work the same way it worked with you, because you were special, you were rare. You were the kind of person they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to replace and failing, because you weren't just a person in their life. You were a moment in their existence when they touched something real, something pure, something powerful, and they were too immature, too insecure, too invested in their own illusions to recognize the treasure they were holding until it slipped through their fingers and transformed into something they can see but never touch again. Now let's talk about the future, your future, the timeline, where you're not concerned with their collapse because you're too busy building your kingdom, where you're not thinking about their regrets because you're too focused on your purpose, where you're not wondering if they've changed because you've changed so much that their evolution or lack thereof has zero impact on your trajectory. Imagine waking up every single day and not thinking about them once, not as revenge, not as avoidance, but as genuine indifference, as natural as not thinking about strangers on the street, as automatic as breathing. Imagine reaching a level of success where their names come up in conversation and you pause for a second trying to remember who they are, where their faces blur together with all the other background characters who played small roles in chapters you barely remember. Imagine becoming so aligned with your purpose, so locked into your vision, so committed to your growth that their opinions, their judgments, their narratives about you feel like ancient history, like gossip from a past life, like noise from a frequency you've evolved beyond. That 0.1% showed them who you were on your worst days, during your darkest seasons, in your most limited state. Now imagine who you're becoming on your best days, during your brightest chapters, in your most expanded form. Imagine them watching from the sidelines as you achieve everything they said you couldn't, as you become everything they said you'd never be, as you create everything they said was impossible, not because you're trying to prove them wrong, but because you stopped letting their limited vision of you define your unlimited potential. Imagine them watching you love yourself the way they never could, watching you choose yourself the way they never did, watching you celebrate yourself the way they never would, and realizing that their rejection wasn't your loss. It was your liberation. It wasn't your ending. It was your beginning. It wasn't your failure. It was your freedom. The collapse they experienced when you revealed 0.1% of your power wasn't just about you getting better. It was about them realizing how much better you always were and how blind they were to see it. How much energy you were suppressing to make them comfortable. How much light you were dimming to make them feel bright. How much power you were restraining to make them feel powerful. And now that you've stopped suppressing, stopped dimming, stopped restraining, they're living in a world where your absence is louder than your presence ever was, where your silence speaks volumes, where your indifference cuts deeper than any words ever could. They're haunted by the ghost of what could have been if they'd chosen to celebrate you instead of competing with you, if they'd chosen to elevate you instead of diminishing you, if they'd chosen to love you instead of using you as a stepping stone for their own broken egos. But here's the beautiful part. The part they'll never understand because they're still playing small, still thinking small, still living small. You didn't reveal 0.1% of your power to destroy them. You revealed it to save yourself, to remember yourself, to reclaim yourself from the prison of other people's expectations, projections, and limitations. Their collapse was just a side effect of your resurrection, a natural consequence of your transformation, an inevitable result of your evolution. You weren't trying to make them fall. You were trying to make yourself rise. And the moment you started rising, everyone who was standing on your shoulders trying to reach heights they couldn't climb on their own, they fell. Not because you pushed them, but because you simply stopped being their ladder, stopped being their stepping stone, stopped being their foundation while they treated you like pavement. And now they're on the ground looking up at you soaring, wondering how you got wings, wondering when you learned to fly, wondering why you're not coming back down to their level. Never realizing that you were always capable of flight. You were just convinced by people who couldn't leave the ground that walking was your limit, that crawling was your destiny, that staying small was your story. But you rewrote the story, you changed the ending, you became the author, the protagonist, the hero, and the victory all at once. And they're just characters in your origin story, the obstacles you overcame, the villains you defeated not with violence, not with vengeance, but with the simple, devastating act of becoming yourself fully, completely, unapologetically. Imagine going to 1% of your power, just 1%, and watching entire networks crumble, watching old alliances disintegrate, watching people who swore they'd never speak to each other bonding over their shared confusion about how you became untouchable, unreachable, unstoppable. Imagine going to 10% and watching industries shift, watching standards elevate, watching people you've never met cite you as their inspiration without knowing your name, watching your influence ripple through communities you've never entered, because your energy is so magnetic, so authentic, so pure, that it transcends physical proximity and touches souls through screens, through stories, through the subtle shifts in consciousness that happen when someone witnesses real power moving with real purpose. Imagine going to 50% and watching the world reshape itself around your vision, watching opportunities chase you instead of you chasing opportunities, watching people who once ignored you now study your every move, analyze your every word, trying to decode the formula, bottle the magic, replicate the success, never understanding that there is no formula, there is no magic. There is just you finally deciding to stop playing small in a world that needed you to stay small so it could feel big. Oh, you really thought it was over, didn't you? You thought when you said okay and turned your back, it was just another Tuesday, another conversation ended, another moment filed away in the archives of forgettable interactions. But no. That single word, that calm little four-letter response, that unbothered exit that triggered something you couldn't have predicted in your wildest nightmares. Because when you said okay and walked away, you didn't just end a conversation. You started an investigation. A full-blown, lights flashing, records pulled, calls made, meetings held investigation. And the best part, the most beautiful, poetic, karma-drenched part, they found absolutely nothing. Because you were clean. You were always clean. And that, my friend, that's what broke them. Let's rewind to that moment, shall we? Picture it. The confrontation, the accusations, the drama they'd been rehearsing in their minds for weeks, months, maybe years. They came at you loaded, armed with assumptions, dripping with certainty that this time they had you cornered. They wanted the explosion. They wanted the breakdown. They wanted you to scream, cry, beg, explain, defend, crumble. They needed your reaction like oxygen. They fed off conflict like vampires on blood. And what did you give them? Okay. Just okay. Not okay. But let me explain. Not okay. You're wrong. Not okay. We need to talk about this. Just clean, surgical, soul-crushing. Okay. And then you walked. No door slam, no final words, no dramatic music. Just footsteps fading into silence. And that silence detonated their entire world. Because here's what they didn't understand. People who are guilty don't say, okay, and leave. Guilty people fight. Guilty people defend. Guilty people scramble to control the narrative because they know the truth is chasing them down like a pack of wolves. But you had nothing to hide. You had nothing to prove. You had nothing to fear. So when they threw their accusations like grenades, you didn't duck. You didn't catch them and throw them back. You just stepped aside and let them explode in their own hands. Your okay wasn't surrender. It was dismissal. It was the most powerful two-syllable rejection of their entire fantasy. It was you saying without saying, you're not even worth the energy it would take to correct you. And they felt that. Oh, they felt that in their bones, in their pride, in their fragile little egos that had been banking on your reaction to validate their crusade. But then something shifted. Because in the hours, days, weeks after you walked away, they started spiraling. They started questioning. Wait, why didn't they fight back? Why didn't they defend themselves? Why were they so calm? What do they know that we don't? What are they hiding? And that's when the paranoia kicked in. That's when the obsession took root. That's when they became the very thing they accused you of being. Unhinged. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't focus. They replayed that moment over and over again in their minds, dissecting your face, your tone, your body language, searching for cracks, for clues, for anything that would confirm their suspicions. But there was nothing. You were stone. You were steel. You were untouchable. And that drove them insane. Because if you were innocent, if you really had nothing to hide, then that meant they were wrong. And being wrong meant they were the villains. And villains don't get happy endings. So they did what desperate people do when the truth doesn't match their story. They investigated. Oh yes, they went full detective mode. They called in favors. They reached out to mutual connections. They dug through your past like archaeologists hunting for buried treasure. They analyzed your social media, your work history, your friendships, your habits, your patterns. They built timelines. They cross-referenced dates. They interviewed people you hadn't spoken to in years. They turned your entire existence into a cold case file, convinced that if they just looked hard enough, deep enough, long enough, they'd find the smoking evidence, the proof, the validation, the justification for their witch hunt. They needed you to be guilty. Not because you wronged them, but because your innocence exposed their malice. And that was unacceptable. So they searched, and they searched, and they searched. And guess what they found? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Clean records, clean relationships, clean reputation. You were a ghost in their conspiracy theory. A blank page in their book of lies. Here's where it gets even better, though. Because while they were busy playing investigator, while they were consumed with proving you were the monster they painted you to be, you were out here living. Unbothered, unburdened, unbroken. You didn't check over your shoulder. You didn't lose sleep wondering what they were saying, what they were planning, what they were finding. Why? Because you knew. You knew there was nothing to find. You knew your conscience was clear. You knew your hands were clean. And that knowing, that unshakable certainty, that quiet confidence, that was your armor. They thought your silence meant fear. They thought your exit meant guilt. But it didn't. It meant freedom. It meant you had evolved past the need to be understood by people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You had transcended their drama, their chaos, their need to drag you into the mud. And that transcendence, that was the real threat. Because think about it. What's more terrifying to a liar than someone who lives in truth? What's more dangerous to a manipulator than someone who refuses to be manipulated? What's more infuriating to a narcissist than someone who simply doesn't care? Your okay was a mirror. It reflected their accusations right back at them. It forced them to sit with their own toxicity, their own projections, their own insecurities, and they couldn't handle it. So they doubled down. They got louder. They got messier. They got more desperate. They turned up the heat, thinking you'd eventually crack, thinking the pressure would force you to react, to engage, to give them the drama they craved. But you didn't. You just kept walking, kept building, kept rising. And every step you took forward was a step they took backward into their own self-destruction. Now let's talk about the psychology behind this, because it's important you understand the full picture. When someone launches an investigation into your life after you've calmly walked away, it's not about you. It never was. It's about them. It's about their need to be right, their need to win, their need to control the narrative. See, people like this, they operate from a place of deep insecurity. They need external validation to feel whole. They need to tear others down to feel tall. They need to create enemies to feel important. And when you refuse to be their enemy, when you denied them the battle they were so desperately seeking, you disrupted their entire identity. You took away their purpose, their mission, their reason for existing in that moment. And that created a vacuum, a void, a crisis. Because if you weren't the villain, then what were they? Heroes? No. They were just people throwing punches at shadows, screaming into voids, building cases against ghosts. And here's the kicker. The harder they looked, the worse they appeared. Because while they were obsessing over you, people were watching them. And what they saw wasn't a concerned friend or a righteous truth seeker. They saw someone unhinged, someone obsessed, someone who couldn't let go. And slowly, quietly, the tables turned. The whispers that were once about you started redirecting toward them. Why are they so fixated on this person? Why can't they move on? What are they really trying to hide? Because projection is a boomerang. What you throw at others with malice always comes back to hit you in the face. And they threw hard. They threw with intent to destroy. So when it came back with compound interest. And you didn't have to lift a finger. You didn't have to defend yourself. You didn't have to expose them. You just had to exist in your truth, in your peace, in your unbothered energy. And that was enough. Let's pause here and appreciate the absolute poetic justice of this situation. They wanted to catch you slipping. They wanted to expose you. They wanted to drag your name through the dirt and stand over the wreckage victoriously. But instead, they exposed themselves. They revealed their own darkness, their own desperation, their own moral bankruptcy. And the beautiful irony? You never said a word. You never pointed fingers. You never retaliated. You just said, okay, and walked away. And that restraint, that discipline, that refusal to descend to their level, that's what made you untouchable. Because you can't investigate someone who's already transparent. You can't expose someone who's already open. You can't destroy someone who's already whole. They were hunting for skeletons in a closet that didn't exist. They were searching for dirt on someone who'd already cleaned their house. They were building a case against a defendant who was never on trial. Now, I know what you're thinking, but why? Why did they go so hard? Why did they care so much? And the answer is simple, yet profound. Because your indifference was the ultimate insult. Your lack of reaction was the loudest statement. Your exit was the final rejection. See, when you care what people think, when you defend yourself, when you engage in the back and forth, you're giving them power. You're acknowledging their opinion matters. You're validating their existence in your world. But when you say, okay, and walk away, you're saying, you don't matter enough for me to fight. You don't matter enough for me to explain. You don't matter enough for me to stay. And that cuts deeper than any insult ever could. Because it's not anger. It's not hatred. It's something worse. It's irrelevance. You rendered them irrelevant. And people will burn the world down before they accept being irrelevant. So they investigated. They called people. They asked questions. They gathered evidence. They built their case. And with every phone call, every conversation, every attempt to paint you as the villain, they were unknowingly painting themselves as the obsessed, the unstable, the unhinged. Because here's the thing about investigations. They require substance. They require evidence. They require proof. And when you have none of those things, when your entire case is built on feelings, assumptions, and projections, it collapses. And not quietly, loudly, messily, publicly. People started seeing through it. Wait, you've been investigating this person for months and found nothing. Absolutely nothing. Then what are we even talking about? And just like that, the narrative shifted. You went from suspect to survivor, from accused to acquitted, from questioned to untouchable. And they went from prosecutors to perpetrators, from righteous to ridiculous, from feared to forgotten. But let's dig even deeper, because there's a layer to this that's absolutely crucial. Your okay wasn't just a word, it was a weapon. A calculated, precise, soul-crushing weapon. Because in that moment, when you chose calm over chaos, when you chose silence over explanation, when you chose exit over engagement, you took away their ammunition. You disarmed them. You left them standing there, loaded weapons in hand, with no target to shoot at. And that disarmament, that was strategic brilliance. Because fighting fire with fire just creates a bigger fire. But fighting fire with water, that extinguishes it completely. Your calm was the water. Your okay was the flood. And their accusations, their anger, their drama, they drowned. Not because you overpowered them, but because you didn't engage them at all. You didn't give them the energy they needed to sustain their attack. You starved them of the reaction they craved. And without that reaction, they had nothing. They were performers without an audience, accusers without a defendant, warriors without a war. And oh, how that must have eaten them alive. Can you imagine? Spending all that time, all that energy, all that effort, building a case, gathering your evidence, rallying your troops, preparing your attack, only to have it met with 2 syllables and a turned back? That's not just defeat. That's humiliation. That's emasculation. That's the ultimate dismissal. Because you didn't just refuse to fight, you refused to acknowledge the fight was even happening. You treated their grand accusation like background noise, like a commercial break, like something so insignificant it didn't even warrant a response beyond okay. And for people who thrive on drama, who live for conflict, who need attention like plants need sunlight, that indifference was death. A slow, painful, ego-crushing death. And the worst part for them? They couldn't even blame you because you didn't do anything. You just left. And leaving isn't a crime. Leaving isn't an attack. Leaving is a choice. Your choice. And that choice exposed the fact that they never had power over you in the first place. Now, while they were busy investigating, let's talk about what you were doing. Living, thriving, evolving, building, creating, expanding. You weren't checking your phone every 5 minutes to see if they were talking about you. You weren't losing sleep over what they might find. You weren't spiraling into anxiety about their opinions or their plans. Why? Because you were free. Free from the burden of needing to be right. Free from the prison of public perception. Free from the chains of other people's approval. You had done the inner work. You had cleared your conscience. You had made peace with your past. You had nothing to hide and nothing to prove. And that freedom, that was your superpower. Because while they were stuck in the past, obsessing over you, you were building your future. While they were digging through your history, you were creating your legacy. While they were investigating your life, you were living it. And that's the difference between someone who operates from guilt and someone who operates from grace. Guilt keeps you looking back. Grace keeps you moving forward. And here's what they didn't anticipate. The investigation itself became the evidence. Not evidence of your guilt, but evidence of their obsession. Every person they called, every question they asked, every stone they turned over, it all came back to one conclusion. This person is obsessed. And obsession? Obsession is never a good look. It screams insecurity. It screams instability. It screams unresolved trauma. It screams projection. And the more they searched, the more obsessed they appeared. The more questions they asked, the more desperate they seemed. The more they tried to expose you, the more they exposed themselves. Because clean people don't need investigations. Innocent people don't require proof. Truth doesn't demand validation. It just exists, quietly, confidently, unshakably. And that's what you were, truth embodied. Walking evidence that not everyone operates from a place of deception. Living proof that some people really are exactly who they appear to be. Breathing testimony that integrity still exists in a world full of imposters. Let me tell you what really happened behind the scenes, because this is where it gets absolutely delicious. Every single person they called, every connection they reached out to, every mutual friend they interrogated, none of them had anything bad to say. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because you treated people with respect. Because you honored your commitments. Because you moved with integrity. Because you didn't play games. Because you didn't manipulate. Because you didn't lie. And when person after person, conversation after conversation, interview after interview yielded the same result, nothing, absolutely nothing incriminating, something started to crack. Not in you. In them. Because cognitive dissonance is a monster. When what you believe doesn't match what reality is showing you, your brain starts to fracture. And their brains? They were shattering. Because they were so convinced. so certain, so sure that if they just dug deep enough, they'd find the dirt. But there was no dirt. There was no scandal. There was no hidden darkness. There was just you, living your life, minding your business, being human, being flawed but not fraudulent, being imperfect but not corrupt. And you want to know what the real investigation revealed? It revealed that the only crime you committed was refusing to play their game. The only sin you carried was not meeting their expectations. The only guilt you bore was being strong enough to walk away. That's it. That's the full report. That's the entire case file. You said okay and walked away, and that triggered them so deeply, wounded their ego so profoundly, shattered their sense of control so completely, that they had to create a conspiracy to explain it. Because accepting the simple truth that you just didn't care enough to fight was too painful, too humiliating, too ego-destroying. So they built a narrative. They created a story where you were the villain, and they were the heroes exposing the truth. But narratives require evidence. Stories need proof. And when the evidence didn't exist, when the proof never materialized, the story collapsed. And they were left standing in the rubble of their own delusion, holding nothing but their shattered pride and their misplaced rage. Here's the part that's going to sting them for years, maybe decades, maybe forever. You never even knew they were investigating. Or if you did, you didn't care. You weren't sitting around wondering what they were finding. You weren't anxious about what they were saying. You weren't defensive about what they might discover. You were just living. And that obliviousness, that complete and total disinterest in their opinion of you, that unbothered energy, that's what made you untouchable. Because you can't hurt someone who doesn't give you access. You can't destroy someone who doesn't need your validation. You can't expose someone who's already standing in the light. They thought they were conducting an investigation, but really, they were conducting a seance, trying to summon a version of you that didn't exist. They were hunting ghosts, chasing shadows, building cases against projections of their own insecurities. And in the end, the only thing they proved was that some people would rather destroy themselves searching for someone else's darkness than face their own. And now that the investigation is over, now that every avenue has been exhausted, now that every stone has been turned and every connection has been questioned, and every theory has been tested and debunked, what are they left with? Silence. The same silence you gave them when you said okay and walked away. Except their silence isn't peaceful. It's heavy. It's suffocating. It's filled with regret, with embarrassment, with the dawning realization that they wasted months, maybe years, obsessing over someone who didn't even think about them. They spent all that energy, all that time, all that emotional bandwidth building a case that crumbled the moment it was examined. And you spent that same time building a life, a career, a future, a version of yourself that's so far removed from their drama, their chaos, their toxicity, that even if they wanted to reach you now, they couldn't. Because you're not on their level anymore. You're not in their world anymore. You're not accessible to their madness anymore. Let's talk about what happens next, because this is important. They don't apologize. They don't admit they were wrong. They don't come clean about the investigation. They just stop. They go quiet. They slink away into the shadows they came from, hoping nobody noticed their obsession, hoping nobody tracked their spiral, hoping nobody connects the dots between their behavior and their accusations. But people notice. People always notice. People see who's constantly talking about someone else. People see who can't let go. People see who's stuck while the other person is moving. And the court of public opinion? It's already rendered its verdict. You, innocent, unbothered, elevated. Them, guilty of obsession, guilty of projection, guilty of wasting everyone's time, including their own. The investigation didn't expose you. It exposed them. And that exposure, that's a scar they'll carry forever.